So as I've been working on my rock wall here, it's kind of taking me down an interesting path. Now, you will see that it does fade into kind of this whole rep situation right here. And then if we come up a little bit, you'll see that I've been working on, I guess you could call it the rock faces. And I'm not quite done with that one. But these ones back here I'm really proud of. I think those turned out really, really well. They might need a little bit of work, but so far I'm really, really, really happy with it. And I'll show you guys how I accomplished this because I think there are some other people out there that might want to do the same thing. So the best part about this procedure is you don't need anything really special. In fact, I've got all these pieces of small styrofoam that were cut from other projects, and this is going to form the base of what's going to turn into that and eventually the other walls that you've seen. To do this is pretty simple. All you're going to do is just break off little tiny pieces like that. Now you could break off bigger chunks like that or like that. Really, you want it random. Just break off a bunch of chunks. Then take some regular old Elmer's glue. This is nothing special. And then one by one, you're just going to kind of stick them all over this. It's really that easy. Like the whole process, the hardest part of this process is cutting up these pieces. Big pieces obviously go in the back. Small pieces go in the front or maybe on the top. And then at the end of it, I'll take my Elmer's glue that I actually have. This is this one that's actually mixed with water. It's 50-50 mixture. And I'll lay it over the top. Just lay a thick coat over the top. And then I'll just sprinkle some of the gravel that I've been using for ballast. Just some regular ballast over it, just to give it some texture. Once that is said and done, I literally just take some basic black acrylic paint and a disposable paintbrush. This one's not in great shape, as you can kind of see. And then I literally make sure I get in all the crevices. I need to get everywhere. Get in that real deep. Obviously put on a thick coat, but make sure you get it in all of the crevices. That's the important part, because this is going to form our shadows. Now for this next part, it really depends on how much you're making. In my case, I'm just going to use a scrap piece of wood. If you're making a whole lot of this, you can mix this up on like a palette and make like, or put it in like a cup. But for me, I think this is just going to be almost probably more than what I need. A lot of this is just leftover black from when I did the shadowing. Now for this part, all I'm going to do is mix in a little bit of white. Okay. And with the black, a little bit goes a long way. But I don't want to mix too much of this because we're going to put this on pretty lightly. So I'm going to mix this up and see how it goes. For the next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bunch of this paint off. Basically, this little streak right here is what we're going to use. And you want to get as much of this off as you can. You want a really pretty light coating on your brush. Just use the edge of the scrap wood, the palette, whatever, and get a decent amount off. And we're basically going to scrape from this for our next part. Now for this part, as I said, you want a pretty light coat and you always want to move down. So I'm just going to kind of cover them like this. And you'll see that it kind of brings out those shadows. So all of the downsides of this are going to keep the shadows. And that's why a light coating is pretty important. Now I'm going to go over this a little darker. I say a little darker, a little heavier. And I want to make sure I get the sides pretty well because the sides are going to get covered up anyway with grass and whatnot. So let's get a little bit more on our brush. As I said, I mixed way too much for this. And you can already see how this is taking shape. I feel like Bob Ross up in here. If you don't know who that is, you're too young. You'll see it is pretty light, and I can actually darken it up just by taking a little bit of kind of a darker black color. And then honestly, what I do is I just mix and match. I'll just add some blacks. Just get just enough on your brush here. And then it adds some nice depth and detail. Now, the next step is I'll go over all this again with maybe a lighter color, maybe get a little white on there. Now this time I want this to be really light. So not light in color, but light coating. So I'm just going to quick brush strokes. And I just keep doing that over and over again. Now the next layer will actually be some of my browns. So as of right now, I actually have about 3, maybe 4 different layers of gray on this. And you can see it's really starting to take shape. What I've done is I've done a couple of brush strokes down with some white to give it a little bit of highlight, but I'm not ready to do full-on highlights yet, so I also brush both directions here. I never go up, always down and side to side. That way we keep the kind of blacks down there that have filled in and made our shadows. We always keep our shadows. You don't really want to rely on natural shadows only because, number one, your lighting's going to be weird and change. Number two, this looks a little bit more realistic. It, it it's weird, but it's just the way it works. So what we're going to do now, if you notice, it looks good. It looks like rocks, but it doesn't look like freshly, I guess, de-earthed rocks. And if you ever notice, like, this looks like granite. This will be like something you'd see in the Rocky Mountains, but not something you'd see in North Georgia. North Georgia, all our rocks are pretty brown and muddy. Most of them are quartz. So we're going to have to go add some browns to this. So next up, I have to add some browns. Now, I've mixed up a good batch of brown here. In order to make brown, it's actually really, really easy. It's roughly 3 parts yellow, 2 parts red, and 1 part blue. Now, that may or may not give you the results you want, and what I do is then I eyeball it. I add a little yellow if I feel it needs some yellow, I add some reds if I feel it needs some reds. Usually don't add any blues, however, I could add some blacks or some whites to really lighten it up and to get, the feel for it. But that is the result right there. In fact, I'm going to add a little more white to it and just kind of lighten it up a little bit because that still looks a little bit dark. And you can play with this. Like, really, there's no wrong answer here. That's the beauty of mixing your own paint is since this is going to be earth tones, it really doesn't matter. Dirt isn't a uniform brown color. So the more poorly mixed, I guess, for lack of a better word to say it, the more poorly mixed it is, the better it's going to look. So let's go ahead and get some of this on here. Now this is where I'm going to break from my rules a little bit because I want to get the tips of this a little brown, but I don't want to get the top brown. So I'm going to move up a little bit. I'm going to brush up, but I'm going to do it very, very gently with a very dry brush. See, there's even some white streaks in there. We'll see what we get here. Very, very gently. You just want to add a little bit more gray back into this. That almost feels like too much. This one looks gorgeous. Now, for this part of the process, I'm going to use a brush that has basically been introduced to the idea of white, but isn't actually coated in it, and we're just going to add some highlights. So this is very, very like one of the most gentle ways that you can brush, but trust me, this is going to look gorgeous when it's done. So we just start from the very tip top and just kind of, I like to just give a little dab here around the top to get most of the wet paint off. And then for the rest of this, I'm just going to kind of work my way down little strokes. We're adding a little highlight to all the peaks. We're not brushing, we're just highlighting. And then we can just gently. You want this to basically touch, but not spend any time in contact with. Just literally adding little sunspots. There we go. I think that looks good. I'm going to do a little bit over here, but I'm going to go the opposite direction again. Now this side, I'm being a little more vigorous with because I don't have much paint left on here. And you can see I'm just kind of flicking it and just getting the paint just kind of off my brush. Also remember there's going to be a bridge over this, so a lot of these highlights are going to show up more as shadows. So we'll see how this looks once the bridge is reinstalled and everything's dry. Now all said and done, this is roughly what it's going to look like at the end. Now, do pardon me, I do have some wet glue around here still. I'm still working on some of the ballast and the ground cover and things like that. But as you can see, this is roughly what it's going to look like here in the end. I might do a little touching up here and there, but it's pretty nice. Now, sometimes you might have some little trouble areas, some places that didn't quite get enough, or maybe one of the pieces fell off or something. Simple fix, and this is going to add a little more realism to this. Take your glue and just put a little dot right like that. Don't worry, it is watery, and that is kind of by design. Then we take a little bit of fluff here from our trees and just kind of stick it in there. If you need, you can use the end of a paintbrush, or in my case, a busted zip tie, and just kind of coerce it into place. Now, let's see if we have any more missing pieces. I'm going to put one right here just because I kind of feel like that's going to look really good. Let's stick a rather large piece of fluff there. There we go. And that is just going to add a little bit more realism. You'll have some mosses and things like that growing in your rock wall. Let's see if there's one more. Let's stick one right here. Boom. Now, the nice part about Elmer's glue is it does glue pretty well clear. So I can add a little glue here and coerce this back into place right there. There we go. Now we just leave it set, let it go, and we'll come back and check on it later. But for right now, that's going to be it for this video. The next time we'll actually come over here and we'll talk about this road project. You can see I've done some of the moss work on the tunnel entrance here, and we'll cover all of this and how I'm actually doing this. Now, this is fairly unique to my project, but a lot of people are probably interested in how I'm actually managing to cover all this up. So that will be on the next part. So make sure you guys follow. Make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube, TikTok, all the above. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Till then, remember, growing old is inevitable. Growing up is optional. But playing trains is mandatory.